Welcome to this month's bonus episode of Rite Gud. For this edition of the book club, we're talking about Koji Suzuki's 1991 novel, Ring, or Ringu, if you prefer. Joining us is Langdon of Death Sentence.
Back, bitches.
You're back, and it sounds like you're vacuuming?
I'm not vacuuming, so I don't know where that sound's coming from.
I don't know where that sound's coming from. Okay, but it seems to be gone now. So when I said I wanted to do Ringu, you jumped on it. You got very excited. You're like, fuck yeah. Because this is a book that's compelling. This is a book I read many, many years ago in college, and occasionally it'll just pop into my head again and just be like, Sadako smallpox. Like, what? Like an intrusive thought. It'll just come up in there. This book has spawned so many spin-offs and sequels and adaptations. It's made this massive franchise, and it's really, really compelling. What is it about this book that has such a hold on people, do you think?
I think for speaking mostly people in the West, because obviously neither of us are Japanese.
Neither of us is Japanese.
Like, we all find out about it pretty much from the, what was it, 98 that the American film came out? 99? Something like that.
Around there, yeah.
And honest to God, one of the best horror films of the 90s. Legitimately a fucking brilliant film. And so for a while, most people, I think, just think of it as, a movie. If you're deep enough into either the science fiction / horror, like readership world, or just I got the cool kind of autism where if I go to a record shop or a bookstore, I will look at every book on the shelf, everyone.
Oh, God.
Which is normal. That's how normal people, that's normal to do that. I'm normal. That's
Everyone
normal.
does this.
Yes.
Don't you listeners? If you don't do this, listeners, you're the weird one, and you should be embarrassed.
Go to a record shop, and I would literally look at, and this is even as far back as when I was like 7 or 8, I would look at every single album in the entire store to figure out the ones I wanted to buy. But
incredible.
It turns out that helps you know a lot about books than music to, have a sociopathic level of autism. At some point, these got translated by Kodakawa, I think, are the people who did the English, who solicited the English translations of them.
Yeah.
But had a really catching cover that all the English editions have. And it's one of those things where I think I first ran into these books because I saw it in a bookstore and I was like, that's weird. They stole that name from the movie. And you pick up the book and you look at it and you go, wait. And then cause not the kind of movie that makes you think this was a novel first. There's nothing about it that feels converted from a novel. Where if you've seen enough movies, you kind of start to get a sense of this probably is an adaptation because of just slight weirdnesses in how things move that feel more like, okay, that was a book that you had to turn into a movie. Me, you, and pretty much everyone else who ran into this book shortly after it got translated, you go and you read it expecting this is probably going to be some hogwash shit. I'm going to laugh a little bit. The movie's going to be way better or something. And then you read it and it's so fucking bizarre. It's happened for the years that I've tried to tell people about these books. We both saw it happen in the Discord when you mentioned hey, we're going to be covering The Ring.
Even if you've seen the movie, it's worth reading the book because it's so much weirder. It is significantly weirder.
People who are like, oh, I love the movie, and you go, you should read the book. The book's fucking crazy. They go, haha, okay. And they just, they don't, and you're like, no, I can't stress this enough. You really need to read it. And they go, sure, yeah, haha. And you go, no, it's 200 pages, a little more than that. They get a death grip on you because it's there's this thing I think that everyone knows within the world of horror, at least, that J-horror moves in a very different way from Western horror. And a lot of that's because they've had horror stories, for the entire time that their culture's been around. So even when they adapted more Western bracketings of the narrative form, it's approaching what is horrific and how does it embody horror from a very different place. So it has this really exciting energy to it, going what if the whole book was like that? And then leaning forward and being what if the book also can't tell if it wants to be a sci-fi novel or not? So it sometimes is and sometimes isn't. And yeah, as you mentioned, especially I think it probably, if I just watched The Ring, then watched a lot of people, I assume you probably did the same thing. You find out it's an adaptation of a Japanese movie before knowing it's a book. So you go watch Ringu.
Yeah, I watched the Japanese movie.
And you go, well, that's also dope. That's the other thing, is that all three of them feel different. They don't feel contradictory, but none of them are a one-to-one adaptation of another. No. Which is exciting to me. I mean, I think that's actually a really cool thing about them, because it feels like each director of a project went, I want to make my Ring and keep all the raw DNA, but it's really like
there's going to be horses in mine.
If you read past this book, everyone gets exponentially crazier, to the point where if I start dropping factoids about book 2 or, my God, the third one, it straight up sounds like I'm lying. It's the verve of the overall franchise feels like the wrong word, although technically that's true, because that feels a bit more capitalistic compared to what it feels like is actually going on with it, which is much more artist driven in a lot of ways. Each work radically recontextualizes all of the other ones to just do a completely different thing, and that it amounts to this hyper zany level of encyclopedic nonsense. It's such a dope way. It's so fucking good.
Nice. So this book's fucking weird, but I feel like you gotta have more than just being fucking weird to get as many people into it as possible, because there are a lot of very weird books that do not have the hold on the culture the way that this one did. And granted, Koji Suzuki was a very prominent novelist and also a very interesting person who's had a very interesting life, it sounds like, in Japan. But even then, why does this translate so well across the world? Why has it had this spread that it has, and why does it hit so well? And I don't think that it's just because it's fucking weird, but I think it really captures a kind of mood. And the time it came out, first of all, the time the book was written, it feels so like a prophecy in many ways. It was written in the early 90s, and then the time when the movie, at least the American movie, came out in the late 90s, which is right before social media was really big. This book, it feels like it captured the sense that we were all about to have our brains melted by the internet, but before the internet melted all of our brains. It was just this is what it's going to do to you. He somehow knew. And I mean that this book is all about virality in multiple ways. I mean, in a way that is nonsense, but it completely works somehow. And it's fantastic.
It makes it not surprising in a certain sense when later on these books become straight up cyberpunk. I'm not making that up, by the way. I won't spoil it for you all. I'm not making it up, though. They become literal cyberpunk novels. But you look back at this one, and like you were saying, the notions of that are embedded in it. He clearly was reading, remembering in Japanese horror and science fiction, this is right around the time that Battle Angel Alita and, trying to remember the name of Ghost in the Shell, Akira has come out. So there's a bunch of stuff sitting in the zeitgeist, especially if you are a politically active artist on the edge of the avant-garde. Not necessarily strictly deep into avant-garde stuff, but especially early on, cyberpunk was sitting at a more avant-garde edge. You were expected to be reading some theory in order to make compelling cyberpunk because of all the references to Baudrillard and Foucault and all that kind of baked into it. So clearly he was thinking about the same kinds of stuff of both virality and virtuality, of the superimposition of things over other things. You can kind of trace it back lineage-wise to anxieties in the early 20th century about because conformity used to not be this big terror for people because you're part of your community. And, maybe every now and again you get the weirdo in the 17 or 1800s who's liberty, the enlightened self. But otherwise people were shut up, nerd, go farm. But then somewhere around the rise of real bodies of socialism, and then parallel to it, fascism, and then the rise of sort of the modern shape of capitalism, all three of them, at least to people outside of them, present this image of conformity as the thing that crushes and annihilates the self. And in order to do that, you kind of have to overlay the image of the ideal self over the real self and flatten the real for the ideal. This shows up in all kinds of like anything that's punk adjacent, for better and for worse, because there are some weirdnesses around that where like, especially I think a lot of us get to adulthood and go, no, there's a degree of hating conformity where you're deliberately alienating yourself from all your friends and peers, and that's not very good. Actually, my life's worse from that. Clearly, he was like thinking about a lot of this stuff, but yeah, encodes it in this like, there's something ingenious about it, right? Looking back, it feels a little bit quaint that he uses VHSs, but I think people who weren't alive in the 80s and early 90s forget that like VHSs were, for a while, insanely expensive. Like insanely expensive. It would be like $500 for a VHS player in the mid 80s and like $500 in mid 80s dollars. So it's like you're paying, imagine buying 4 PS5s in order to watch a VHS of like Murder, She Wrote episodes. So like it did have this sort of science fictional edge, but then his notion of the virus is this weird combination of like, there's the technological metaphor of the replication of videotapes, which everyone kind of knows even from the movie, and how he hints at and makes far more explicit in later books in this that that's a virus replicating itself, that's it's taking its DNA. Actually, no, he does first say that in this book, that it's a digitalized encoding of a kind of DNA. But in the book version, he has this absolutely batshit fucking crazy origin of that notion of Sadako and her mom are kind of sort of real psychics that like embed their consciousness in photographs that they can also witness from a distance as a dying act. Sadako embeds herself using that into a VHS, because what is a VHS but thousands of photographs? So she can exponentiate her consciousness. Here, what the fuck?
And smallpox, not just Sadako, but smallpox.
Yeah, they make a tie at the end where they say that she functionally is a reborn version of smallpox.
Because she had the last case of smallpox in Japan. And as she was dying, the smallpox virus was dying inside of her, and they kind of mixed together to carry on their existence together.
It's this really ingenious thing that, like, I think a lot of, as much as we can talk about how there's a lot of instances of bad horror, bad fantasy, kind of leaning way too heavily on a didactic wing of allegory, I think that has to be said more, not to dissuade people from either didacticism or allegory, because horror requires you to be horrified by something, and most of the horror isn't like, oh, that's nasty, because that's being grossed out, that's not horrified. Most horror is more like a moral revulsion, like you see something that's like reprehensible and you find that horrific. He invokes the smallpox thing in the like he mentions offhandedly things like America's usage of smallpox against communities of color and its use as a bioweapon as like this embodiment of social cruelty that gets passed on, because in the book they omit from every fucking film version Sadako's Sadako's intersex, and shockingly for a book that came out in 1991, it states that Sadako is a woman and never misgenders her, but has other people commit violence against her, both physical and implied sexual violence as well. Based on this, the level of her rage becomes a bit more totally understandable in terms of like the volume of it, compared to the film where it's just like girl in well. Granted, I'd be pissed if I died.
I would also be upset about being a girl in a well. That seems like a bad time.
To diminish that one, I'd be pretty mad.
Yeah,
girls don't belong in well. You can quote me on that.
I think that the fact that it's a rape too is missing from both the film adaptations. That she gets smallpox by being raped by a doctor who has a mild case of smallpox.
that doctor is, if I remember correctly, he's like kind of sort of a father figure as well. And he's exploiting her and her mother for their psychic abilities. So
no, that's a different doctor.
That's a different doctor. Okay.
That's her father figure, the professor, like the psychic researcher guy, is exploiting her and her mother. But that's the guy who's dying in the hospital. And while she's visiting him in the sanitarium or whatever, this other doctor who works at the sanitarium, who she's been hanging out with, he goes on a walk with her, leads her into the woods, and violates her and throws her in a well.
If when you're hearing this, you're thinking, God, those guys sound pretty terrible. We'll get there. Don't worry.
Yeah.
These episodes have outlines. Don't worry. We'll get there.
Yeah. Eventually.
It's this really intriguing set, because it's also structured more like a detective novel than like a horror novel most of the time, which is, I think, an interesting tonal shift if you're not not familiar with it.
It's a bit like a noir. It's a lot like a noir. I'm thinking of that Otto Preminger film where most of the film is, the beginning I think starts with them getting news that she's died in a car accident, and they're all telling their stories, and it kind of takes that tone, that structure of, here's a lot of people. I mean, we get this videotape, we figure out that it's by someone named Sadako Yamamura, and now we try and figure out who was Sadako Yamamura, why did she create this tape, and we're getting stories about her and her family from these outside perspectives, and nearly every outside perspective is from someone who was hostile. I mean, one of the people who knew her when she was a young woman was another member of this theater troupe. She was trying to be an actress, but it just didn't quite work out. And I mean, the other member of the theater troupe who knew her just only said, like, oh, she was weird and gross, you know.
I forget whether it's in this book or in a later one. It's implied as well that she was sexually taken advantage of within the theater.
Some creepy guy from the theater group paid her a visit, and the next thing that happened is he showed up the next day at the company and just fell down and fucking died. Just dropped dead. So it's like, okay, you deserve that, fucker. He did something real bad, or at least tried to do something real bad, and then he just collapsed and fucking died.
It's also like, it's something I think is really interesting about the structure of this book is we get, unlike in a lot of the film versions, I think it does actually show up in the initial TV film version of The Ring that predated Ringu. But we get a brief, I think 2 chapters of the first people who watch the video, or not the first, the people who watch the video immediately before the main character. And it's funny because on one hand, it does the pretty standard horror trope of a bunch of teens.
Yeah, the opening kill, especially if it's a teen girl. But it's a teen girl minding her own business, and then, dead.
But it's funny because, like, in this case, again, testament to the fact that Koji Suzuki, similar to Wes Craven when he was at his peak, is clearly thinking very consciously about how he's structuring it. Because at first you're going, oh, it's a stereotypical opening, oh, it's just teens or whatever. But then it becomes pressingly dark and cruel that of all people that we get direct depictions of the death of, it is itself a young girl who almost got taken advantage of by her boyfriend in a distant place, doing absolutely nothing and just being presented this tape. There are these echoes of Sadako's base trauma, or at least the most eruptive trauma. I mean, definitely not the base, I think.
Right.
But that are repeated by Sadako, which is a really potent image that it's interesting because it fits both the noir archetype of fucked up people fucking up other people, some of whom are fucked up and some of whom aren't yet, as well as the more, this is also where I poo-poo the people who are like, I don't like the whole elevated horror thing. Horror doesn't always have to be about trauma. Well, I don't know what you thought horror was about prior to these things, because it sounds like you're illiterate, because horror is largely almost all about trauma. I'm not sure if people know this, but getting murdered by monsters is traumatic, and normally we're scared of that because it would be really bad.
Elevated horror is when they talk about it in therapy, which I prefer the kind where they don't.
the root function, though, of like we're talking about, because that's another thing that sort of provokes horror, is not only a primal pain, but a primal pain that we will subconsciously begin inflicting on others, wittingly or not, and having Sadako live that out, where it's like whenever we get evidence of her, even when we're being presented, it's funny because even when we're being presented testimony of her life from people who hate her or view her with suspicion or things like that, they can't help but half confess their own cruelty. They'll like try to justify it, but then they're like, I hid the fact that my coworker raped her, but you have to realize she was weak.
Yeah.
That it's then of all things to have that person carry out mirrors of her own pain to people who don't deserve it. There are many people who do it. When the one rapist doctor just kind of dies for no clear reason, I don't think there's a reader in the world who's like, oh, no. You're like, well, I mean, yeah, you played with fire, buddy. But it's a really interesting way to make that specific opening scene, especially if you reread it, sting in a really specific way. And him deliberately picking something where you're not going to pick it up as you're
I don't believe the rapist doctor dies.
Oh, I thought he did.
There was the theater, the guy who just dropped dead was the theater guy, right? Like the creepy theater guy. But I believe the doctor, all that happens is that like Ryuji just tweaks his nose like a 1950s greaser and says like, hey, fuck you, buddy, and then they just leave.
I had forgotten that part. That's way funnier in a Bleak Does Nothing.
Because there's a whole description, there's a whole discussion that they have is like, well, why didn't she kill the doctor? If she has this power, why wouldn't she kill her rapist? Why wouldn't she kill him? And it's like, well, I don't know. You know,
that's a good question. Sort of.
Yeah, they puzzle it out. Well, Ryuji comes to a conclusion, which is that she didn't will him to rape her, but she did will him to kill her because she was just fucking done. And she wanted to be killed in a way that would, like, allow her to create this immortality. But this is coming from Ryuji, though. So take that with a grain of salt because it's Ryuji.
Yeah. I think at this point it's worth us maybe mentioning that the two main characters who are different kinds of
terrible
deeply
men.
Insane.
Asakawa is a very bland character. He's just kind of there, but despite his blandness, he manages to be a terrible husband and father. And then his friend Ryuji is like, I mentioned before that this book is somehow the internet before the internet exists. Ryuji is like Reddit. Like if Reddit gave birth to one of those Tibetan thought forms, like a oh god, what do you call it?
Tulpa?
A tulpa, yeah. He's like a tulpa made out of Reddit, in that he's very knowledgeable and very useful, and also the creepiest motherfucker on earth. Just a horrible, weird little man who is introduced by telling Asakawa about a time that he raped a girl using psychic powers or something. He's the worst vibes. Asakawa's wife is just like, please don't bring that fucking guy into our house, like, ever. Just please don't fucking bring that guy into our house. And all he can say is, yeah.
At one point, he kind of thinks to himself, I'm glad I never brought up that Ryuji raped someone to my wife, because she'd be really mad about that. And then just sort of moves on. And you're like,
yeah. And this whole book, you're like, what the fuck?
Asakawa is in a certain way, Asakawa is worse in ways than Ryuji, because Ryuji gives off sociopath, I'm going to wear your skin vibes all the time. That's bad, but we've gotten a lot of like social discourse about this. The kind of person who signals very clearly, I'm an evil, insane piece of shit, sucks. But that's easier to avoid. Asakawa is like Martin Luther King Jr.'s white liberal, but like on steroids, in that he just passively acknowledges, but just continues to allow incredibly horrible things to happen because he can't be moved to give a shit about anything. He serves in a lot of ways as almost like the way that noir really fucking hates detectives. It's really funny that in certain neo-noir, people kind of think of them as like, oh, these cool, suave characters. And then you watch classic noir and you go, they hate everyone on the screen.
Yeah, this guy's a piece of shit.
Because it's like, Asakawa only cares about detective stuff. That's it. He's a journalist, but he only cares about journalism. It seemingly doesn't give a shit about his wife or his kid. Like, every now and again, he'll go, oh, shit, I have a baby. Oh, whatever.
Yeah, he goes out to help for this colleague only when it becomes obvious that he'll literally die without his help. The whole time he's just thinking like, well, he might get the scoop. I don't want him to get the scoop before me. Like, literally, this is a haunted videotape that killed 4 people. Can you maybe think a little bit about more than getting the right scoop? And
it's like,
I guess if I die, I won't be able to get my name on the byline.
And it's funny because he learns about the tape because he happens to go on vacation, sees the tape. I think he watches like a bit of it and then immediately turns it off and it's like, that's fucking weird. And he mentions it to Ryuji, who later goes, and isn't it that he goes up alone and watches it himself and is like, haha, I'm gonna die now.
No. In the book, what's happening is he hears about it. He hears about the death of like one of the 4 kids because a taxi driver witnessed it.
Yeah.
And he hears about it from the cab driver, and he goes and investigates and finds out like, wow, all these 4 kids who are young and healthy all died of a heart attack at the exact same time. Finds out that they all took a vacation together at this one place, this one little cabin, and he thinks like maybe it was some kind of virus. So he goes out there, and while he's there, he watches this videotape. And he watches the whole thing, but the bit at the end where it says like the only way to save yourself is, the bit is taped over as a little prank because the teenagers were being little assholes. And
so
then
most
that's a whole
of the
video.
book is him trying to figure out like, what did I see? And later, how do I not die?
What's the charm? How do I fix this?
And so Ryuji winds up also like Ryuji watches it too. Just sort of like, I forget exactly why he does it, but he's just sort of like, haha, now we're both gonna die, so we both have to solve this mystery.
Ryuji doesn't give a fuck.
Insane person. This is where we get some of the stuff that's like 2 things about Ryuji that condemn Asakawa substantially more than Ryuji. So early in the book, Ryuji confesses to him like, I raped a person, as we'd mentioned, and Asakawa's like, I hate this guy. He's so weird and creepy, but I can't just let him get away or whatever. And he tells himself all this stuff. And it's only near the very end of the book that Ryuji says explicitly to him, I never actually did any of that. And it gets revealed that he's functionally asexual from like his secretary.
No, Ryuji doesn't reveal that. It's his girlfriend.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's what it was. It was
It's after Ryuji dies, Asakawa goes to his house or something, and his girlfriend's there, and she says, let me clear the air about what you think our relationship was. He was actually very innocent, and I don't know if he'd ever even been with a woman at all.
And then there's this bit where he lied about committing a rape because he knew that Asakawa craved someone else living out the bleak, almost sociopathic thrill that Asakawa feels is lacking from his life. And it's clearly the same thing that drives him to be a journalist, is precisely that. And again, this functionally feels like a critique of social media before social media. Granted, this is like tabloids and like yellow journalism and all that, going back way, way, way back, of like, my bland life causes me to crave witnessing a kind of primal violence being enacted because that makes me feel alive in a way that I just don't feel alive in my day-to-day life. And so I will feign disgust at this stuff, but I will never ever look away. I will never try to stop any of this stuff. I just want to feel this like moral indignation as a mask to a perpetual witness of like horrible violence. And Ryuji just calling him on his shit, being like, you like this. I'm pretending you like this though.
And Ryuji this whole time is kind of portrayed as just stronger in every way. He's better at the detective work. He's physically stronger than Asakawa. Asakawa, as much as he hates him, also really does admire him in a lot of ways. And has admired him ever since they were schoolmates, because he was this very athletic guy or something that Asakawa kind of thought was cool when he was a kid. He was like Jim Sell or something, I guess.
I really like how the book never draws direct attention to the fact that if there is a male character and they are not literally just a passerby, they are a huge piece of garbage.
Except for the one fisherman. There's a bit where Sadako's mother has a vision and dredges like a possibly cursed religious statue out of the sea. The fisherman who gives her a ride out to the ocean, he seems okay. He seems like an okay guy. He's got a major crush on her. He doesn't take advantage. He averts his eyes respectfully, even though he is very, very attracted to this girl. He seems okay.
And it's like,
if she'd married him, things would have been fine. He just seems like the kind of solid, dependable Samwise Gamgee type husband who is like a very good partner to the crazy goth woman.
It becomes this cutting analogy. So we see a lot of things from not just people beholden to second wave feminism, but a pretty common thing of people who have very real and very like totally fucking understandable trauma regarding men that then becomes a sort of pathological thing, that the realistic traumatic response of like this thing gave me pain at some time gets mapped onto this universalist thing of like they can't help but inflict pain. There's this animalistic thing that winds up in a lot of ways. One of the chief critiques of that mode of thought is it cheapens a lot of the actual critique of that kind of violence, because if you make it pathological, then it's like getting mad at a cat for eating meat. Like if it's an obligate carnivore, it's almost like not its fault in a certain way. And the inclusion, it's this smart, very economical in its narrative by having just this one person who's legitimately a sincere and considerate person makes all of the other dudes being horrible pieces of shit really sting, because they're like, oh, these are bad people. This is not the cynical thing that people are bad. This is like, there are bad people, and it's worse that not everyone's bad. If everyone's bad, you could just be a prick all the time, then Sadako would be kind of right in kind of like ruthlessly killing kind of anyone. But allowing that complication, which is something that a lot of horror that dives into stuff that's this relatively dark can lean on, I think, the trite and easy, overly cynical position, which, again, it oversimplifies stuff to the point where it's like, okay, now it's not really horror anymore. In a certain way, I Spit on Your Grave almost isn't a horror film, especially most modern feminist reads of it, because it's like, yeah, these guys sexually violate a woman, and then she murders all of them. That's just dope? Like, that's dope? She kills a bunch of horrible people, versus in this where you're like, I feel bad. I feel bad almost every page.
And that Sadako's violence isn't focused in a way that's fair or just. It just radiates out to anyone who's kind of within reach, anyone who's vulnerable. Well, that's how it fucking goes, man.
Yeah, and it's like...
That's just real.
That's the thing that makes it sting more, is that sense of it. Because that's the other thing that I feel...
Because she's absolutely right to be angry at the world. The world treated her and her mom so bad. All she's ever known is this like misery and cruelty and suffering. Just everyone's just been shitty to her and her mom her entire fucking life. Just for existing, not even for doing anything wrong. It's just, well, she's weird. Like, yeah, okay.
I mean,
so fucking what?
It's a thing.
She's weird, but also she's hot, which makes me madder. All right.
See, and I want to have sex with her, and that makes me feel weird. You're like, why? Just be attracted to her. Why is that? And why are you so fucking bizarre? It touches on a thing that I think a lot of people in the more liberal wing of even leftist space tend to be wary of, which is a kind of obligate sympathy to certain figures like the school shooter or the incel or things like that. Not so much that you think when they reach that point, now I'm sympathetic to them, because that is weird, but more that people like that don't emerge from nothing. They aren't like born ontologically evil and then it's just a matter of time. Especially if you hold to like a materialist, like I don't believe in weird supernatural shit, so I don't think that a weird ghost inhabits their brain. Things happen in their life that lead them there, which means that other things could have happened that wouldn't have led them there. So there's always a kind of tragedy, even if it's not a personal tragedy, it can maybe just even be a sociological or cultural one, that like we have a culture that generates these figures where pain, whether deserved or not, transforms into sort of a mass social violence. And that's really disturbing. Once you get past sort of, again, the easy armchair moralizing of like, well, people who do bad things are bad. Yeah, no fuck and no fucking shit. Jesus, that's a not insightful. That instead taking the step further of like, well, the classic thing of like, how come we know some of the answers to this, but how come mass gun violence is one, predominantly American? We know some of the answers to that, but it's also predominantly male and predominantly cis male as well. And these become, there aren't clear answers for that. And this is where I think sometimes if we merely look for just structural oppression, which is obviously very fucking real and very horrible, it doesn't make any sense. You have to kind of look beyond that to like generators of pain and isolation and alienation that maybe don't come from those axes. I don't know. It's a very fruitful and ugly challenge, which is, again, something that I feel like we've probably not only speak for both of us, but like anyone who likes horror. I like when it challenges me in a really ugly, difficult way. That's something I really treasure about like good horror. Mm-hmm. But it's like not giving me the easy, like, pat me on the back. You think racism's bad. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Yeah, thanks. Which a lot of stuff sort of solids itself with. Again, you don't need to be an ethical genius to be like, racial antipathy is wrong. That's just correct. It is really insane, though, how the handling of supernatural elements in this work, which also are technically they're in the film, because, like, there's no clear, they never say how the tape works, and she crawls out of the TV in the film, which she doesn't do in this at any point. Although
there's just a smell. There's just sort of a citrus smell, and you feel like there's something behind you, and you're super scared, and then you're dead.
There is the prophecy from the island that Sadako's mom is born on, and the weird idol that gets thrown into the ocean, and it's like if something ever happens to this idol, a horrible thing will happen, like classic thing, and then immediately after it's thrown into the ocean, now this psychic bitch gets born. They do have real psychic powers that are rigorously tested, and no one else in the novel does. It's not like this is a widespread thing. It's very strange, but it's also well documented. And just, I really like that valence of weirding that's a little bit more on the science fictional end than the film, in that it dives into a bit more of the inquiry, the skeptical inquiry into it, but deliberately doesn't do the cornball shit of like nailing down the mechanics of it.
No, thank God.
Yeah, right?
It's vague enough to be, everybody has a little psychic energy. She just has more. That's it.
And it's just, that's crazy. When they're mulling over, like, do you think if we fuck around with the statue, we can make this stop? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. Couldn't hurt, though. I'm scared of a statue being psychic and evil, though. It lives in the ocean and is mad. Again, all of this stuff it's interesting comparing this to the film, I think, in a lot of ways, because Asakawa in the book has a wife and a kid, and then they have parents, and I forget whether, so I know in this one, it's revealed that the wife watches the video with the child.
Yes.
I forget what,
because Asakawa left the tape in the fucking VCR. He's so bad at this. Even Ryuji's like, bro, you fucked up. Come on, man. What were you doing there?
He goes to, which is like such an on-the-nose metaphor for not caring about his family and like allowing harm to come to them because he's so obsessed with his own career path, which is also most of the other awful men in this can be sort of summed up in that way of like they're so focused on achieving themselves that they just don't give a fuck about
Sadako's
people
father?
around.
Question mark. I feel like it's implied in at least one of the adaptations that he's not her biological father, this sort of professor dude who Sadako's mother is with. I mean, originally I think she's a side piece or something like that. He's this professor of psychic research who's much older than her, and he ends up just sort of exploiting her and isn't really interested in her well-being. I feel like in one of the adaptations it's implied that like he's really more like a stepdad and Sadako was fathered by something else.
It's
I don't think it appears in this book.
There's a lot of implication in, I think it's later books, that her mom kind of like parthenogenesis Sadako, and then this shit gets crazy. There's in later books, Sadako straight up becomes Tomie. Those who know. I think in a later one, it also implies that Asakawa's mom's parents watched the tape as well. There's just some weird shit that goes on with that. Like the final scene being him racing home, having acquired a VHS player that had like a dual deck so he could dupe the tape, and just racing home to do that is this really weird, narratively weird place to end, because it's like it's very high tension, but it's also in a certain way very bland, because he's just driving. There's no traffic or anything. He's just like, God, I gotta dupe this tape. I have like 2 hours and home's 30 minutes away. But compared to the films, where even in Ringu, they collapse all of Asakawa's family into him and make him into a woman, which I think tilts the story in an interesting way.
I believe he has a kid, though. Well, she has a kid in Ringu in the Japanese film. Yeah.
And then in the American version, they make the Ryuji character marry
her ex-husband or something, right?
And it's like, it's funny because like normally you look at adaptations and whatever, we have all the tropes about that, but looking at that one, those are really smart narrative choices, I think, especially if you aren't intending to do the increasingly batshit sequels. Making this into a marital relation mirrors Sadako's life in such a satisfying way, even as they cut some of those elements from the film itself. Like the resonant echo of that knife twist is it's piquant. Yeah, my shocking hot take: The Ring is a good film.
Yeah, my shocking take that I will tell anyone is that the American version of the movie is better than the Japanese one. Come fucking fight me. I'll do it. Having a psychic character, putting a psychic character in a mystery is some bullshit. That is, no, you gotta like figure out the clues on your own. You cannot just have a vision. Fuck you.
Or if you do that, you gotta have more weird shit, so it's like there's constant disruption.
Yeah.
Like, if it's just one level of disruption, then it feels like Deus Ex Machina. But if there's like constant weird shit going on, you're like, whatever. I have no idea what's going to happen in the next scene.
Yeah. But let's talk a little bit about the structure of the book. It's interesting that this book, it's called Ring. And I mean, it can refer to that ring of light that's at the top of the well when the cover's on it, and you can see a little bit there. But there's this very cyclical structure in this book. I mean, there's the fact that it begins and where it ends. It begins where Asakawa's theory is that these kids caught some kind of virus, and that's where it ends. They did catch a virus. They caught like psychic smallpox ghost. It begins at this cabin, and then it ends at, it turns out, oh shit, we gotta go back to the cabin because that's where Sadako is. There's even like a structure, I don't know if you noticed, but he's driving around in circles throughout the city on this ring road constantly. He's just going in circles while he's driving, which is a really, really big part of this book, which is how it ends. It begins with him in a taxi cab, and it ends with him, again, driving in fucking circles. And it's this videotape of copying it and showing it to someone else, which again is circling around, repeating the cycle, Sadako repeating the cycle of violence that has been done to her, this cyclic structure of something that's just never gonna fucking end. I think it's perfect that the book ends where it is, because it's like, all right, we're at the beginning of a new cycle. We don't know exactly what's gonna happen the next time, but we can kind of guess. This is just the first cycle that's played out in this way.
There's something
I'm wrestling with
really,
my cat, so that's why my chair is squeaking. Hello, Harley.
There's something really brilliant about, as well, the way that, so this ties into how, in the midst of trying to solve their curse, Asakawa and Ryuji do a million different things that, if Sadako was a reasonable ghost, so to speak, you would imagine would quell things. They find out, oh, she was just left in this well, and this cabin was built on top of the well. That's the other thing, is that the tape seems to have literally emerged from Sadako projecting her dead consciousness upward from the well into the room that had videotapes, and just overwritten one random videotape with her mind. So they're like, oh, let's dig her up and find her home, like the island she was born on, and let's give properly inter her and give her a burial with rites. Let's get the statue and put it back on the island. Let's right all of these wrongs that we found that are cruel and unjust. And none of those are the thing. The only
I know, it's such a good twist. It's so mean.
It's specifically that, and it goes back to that ring structure. It's that she doesn't want closure. She doesn't want to break the cycle. That's not what's desired. It is just to repeat and replicate. That sense of replication is what he does a pretty ingenious thing. The next book is called Loop, which I think fits because that's like a circle of directionality, right? That's like you are going in one of the two directions around a circle, but cycling forever. Like it makes literal the cycle rather than sort of the static object of a ring. And then the last one is called Spiral, which is a loop that is then projected along a second dimension. So you're not just circling around, but it's exactly that thing where it's like this constant repetition of, and obviously on one hand, I think if someone were boring, they'd be like, oh, well, that's just sort of a gimmick. And it's like, yeah, you've cracked the code. Literature and art use artifice to structurally embody themselves. You figured it out. I get annoyed with people who refer to like structural motifs or organizing patterns as gimmicks. Because I'm like, you just don't like books. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, use chapters? How quaint.
When people say, this story used tropes, like, yeah, they all do that. That's kind of what stories are made of, man.
That's what archetypes are.
This song has notes in it.
If you took one class on literature, including the high school, you would know this. Like you were saying, he uses it to a narrative end to specifically, there are points where you go, oh, there's a terminus here, and there's obvious termini that show up, and deliberately crossing them out to go, no, this isn't a story that ends. This isn't a story that has closure. And there's something, I especially find that kind of thing satisfying in something like horror, where I think sometimes we're pushed to have a really pat ending to things. Like we even get this in general as writers being told, like, have an ending in mind, give a sense of closure, and have your denouement and all that kind of stuff. Typically gets broken in literary fiction because that's not how life works ever. Like,
yeah,
I mean, we're recording this on Juneteenth. The wounds of slavery have super duper not gone away. Like ultra crazy hyper not gone away at all. And that's picking something from, at this point, nearing 200 years, like 160 years ago now. You go further and further, and you can still find these ugly repeating echoes of things. And so it's like, there's something really satisfying about literalizing.
Yeah.
He uses this analogy later on. He picks up the DNA thread in the immediate sequel. Without getting too deep into that one, the chain and helical structure of DNA as replicas of the ring and the loop and the spiral. He does this really ingenious like extrapolation of image metaphor for both narrative information, but then also structural organizational methodology. It's just, one of those things we were talking about this literally right before we hit record, where it's like, damn, this guy can actually write though.
He's good at it. And I think the fact that the story ends the way it is part of why it hits so hard. Because, I mean, we're all expecting this the first time you read it or the first time you watch the movie to be like, okay, it's done. It's fine. They figured out what went on. They're giving her a proper burial. They said everything right. And then the dude dies anyway. And it's like, what the No!
Yeah, that's the other thing is that, like, so if I can give
it's so mean. It rocks.
If I can give an immediate spoiler of something that happens early on in the second book, because I think it like really deepens this point, is one of the first things they reveal, Asakawa's family dies. They copy the tape and they die. Which is an extra level of like, what the fuck? And again, that focus on constant knife twist. Because again, if merely replicating the tape preserves you, okay, now you have closure. And even Asakawa was thinking of it. It's like eventually you're replicating tape on tape on tape on tape. But if everyone's seen the tape and everyone's copied it, then we're all good. And deliberately, again, seeking out any possible end to the narrative, per se, and just crossing it out. In a, like, again, deeply cruel way. In the opening of the second book, Asakawa is fully catatonic and hasn't spoken for months to anyone because his whole family died, even though in his mind he did everything right. And he lived, is the other thing.
Oh, God.
So it's
like the one who really doesn't deserve to live. If we're
like,
going in terms of innocence,
his family didn't deserve to be brought into this, and in his mind, he's like, I don't even really deserve to come out. He's like, my best friend, who's awful, still his best friend.
Or is he?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Is that like
that's the other thing. Is that the truth, or is that thing that Ryuji's student/girlfriend said? Is that also bullshit? Like, what? We don't really know. We don't know from it. I do find it interesting though that the way his death sequence at the end so mirrors the teen girl's death at the beginning. Here's this innocent teen girl getting ready for her studies, trying to study for an exam, and she dies alone in the apartment. And here's him, this potentially very innocent, we don't know, person who dies in very much the same way while trying to call his girlfriend for help. And all he can get out over the phone is to yell, to scream, because like he's getting attacked by whatever it is. The question is, was his story about being a serial rapist bullshit? Was his girlfriend's story also bullshit? What is your deal? It is okay for Pride Month. In your opinion, is Ryuji an egg?
Absolutely.
There are multiple moments where, like, out of the blue, in response to nothing and no one, he starts talking about how the ideal human being is neither male nor female, and non-binary people are all incredibly hot. They're just on a boat, they're just traveling, and all of a sudden he just says, you know what, let me talk about how intersex people are all incredibly, insanely hot and completely flawless. Like, okay, Ryuji, those are very cisgender thoughts to have. Thank you for sharing this with me.
It's funny because I've seen some really callous interpretations of that, but it feels to me, especially if you know kind of the political trajectory of a lot of the writers in this sort of sector of Japanese art, unsurprisingly, it's not really promoted very much that Hayao Miyazaki was a member of the Youth Communist League when he was younger. And various things like that. They're not just a little political, they're very political. And some of them had fallings out with, say, the Japanese Communist Party and things like that, but it's still fallings out based on, like, I have a political directionality and I'm not sure that we're doing it, versus, like, I've become bored of politics as I get older. The more you know that, the more apparent it is that the valence of inexplicable violence against queer people, and specifically using Sadako as coming from, it's implied that she's Ryukyuan rather than Japanese because of roughly where the islands would be, which is I only know this because my spouse is Ryukyuan. Otherwise, I would not have known this at all. But like Okinawa, up until like the mid-1800s, was not part of Japan. It was the capital island of a completely different kingdom called Ryukyu. And Japan, in one of their earlier bits of imperialism, just kind of invaded it out of nowhere. And eventually they were like, fine, fuck it, you can annex us. And it's viewed in Japan is similar to the issues with the Ainu, where if you ask like a regular Japanese person, they may or may not be aware or even really care. But if you ask people like from Okinawa, they go, I'm not Japanese, I'm Okinawan. Or if you ask someone from one of the smaller Ryukyuan islands, they're like, I'm Ryukyuan, I'm not Japanese. Stuff like that. That to have basically a Ryukyuan intersex person experience this kind of violence, both physical and sexual, and then have Ryuji pontificate on this. He's really trying to make sure that you understand that he's like, it's not incidental that she's queer, and she's not queer and intersex in like a monstrous way. It's that everyone treats her like it's monstrous, and it's not.
Yeah. And she's just this hot girl who just wants to be an actress, man.
In future books in the series, it kind of every now and again you'll get some further information about her past, especially in the acting troupe. And it's all heartbreaking shit. It's like, oh yeah, she left this really abusive and exploitative thing and was really committed to acting. And everyone treated her like garbage because of it, because they thought she was weird and sexy, but because she was intersex, they had like gay panic, even though she's like, I'm just a woman. That's just the conditions of my birth, but I'm a woman. You can be normal. And like really horrible, cruel shit. It's likewise, I think, really fascinating to me. And for people who've only read Ring, I think their reticence to find this interesting is fair, but like it's one of those things you have to just be assured it is very compelling. Ryuji becomes the counterpoint to Sadako as sort of the structural pole. And it's going back to your comment about his pontification about non-binary and intersex people, I don't think it's incidental that these two figures who represent either embodied or deep pontification of that kind of embodied queerness become the two poles of this story overall. I was telling you some of it in private. I'm not going to repeat it here. Y'all just got to read it.
He somehow gets weirder in the sequels to this book, which given who he is in this book is quite an accomplishment to take this guy and make him even fucking weirder.
It radically it makes you go back and reinterpret again, like all of what you know about Ryuji. Oh, another fun factoid about the second book that I just remembered. His assistant is revealed to have watched the tape while it was in Ryuji's office, but she was ovulating. So she gives virgin birth to Sadako, who grows to a fully grown woman in less than a week.
Like you do?
Oh, sure. It's so crazy.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, this shit's so fire. You read it and you go immediately, oh, I know why people were bending over backwards to make films out of this, because like before the American one came out, there was the TV version, then the Japanese version, then I think the Korean version got made next, then the American version. There have been, as people know, they made the film version of like Ring 2, which is completely unrelated. There's Ring the Final Chapter, which was a TV series in Japan. There was the Ring Virus, which I think was that was the Korean one. The fact, there's something also satisfying given the notion of Sadako as literally this virus that replicates and mutates, that there are so many adaptations that are so different from one another and like discontiguous. It's one of the few times that feels like structurally satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Like it'd be way less interesting if it was just a continuous series. Like if it was the sequel is part 2 of a never-ending whatever. One of the big critiques, not the biggest one, but one of the big critiques of the Marvel films when they seem like they're dying, hopefully they're dying, is none of them feel like they have a beginning or end. They all feel like the middle part of a perpetual telescoping thing. So like you never get any sense of narrative closure from anything. And these feel almost like the opposite, in that you never get closure because it constantly fully upends what you think you know about it and then just stops. And you go, certainly the next one will answer these questions. And it just gives you new, different questions. It was so dope. I'm such a big fan. Yeah, I could talk about these forever.
It's a very good book. Highly recommended. Even though we've spoiled all of it, if you haven't read the book, read the book. It's a really quick read. It's short, it's tight, it feels very dense even though it's very short, and it is a real page turner. It's extremely compelling. Absolutely read this crazy ass book.
And one of the great benefits of it, even if this part's spoiled, is read the book, and then the minute it's done, I promise you'll go onto the wiki for The Ring and look at how many other stuff there is and how wildly different all of it is. And if you have even a modicum of good taste, you'll be like, holy shit, I have to check it out. Like, I have to know what else gets done with it.
Yeah, you really do. You really do. In conclusion, Ryuji, what is your deal?
You fucking wacko.
You strange little creature. You weird little man.
He's kind of like if a goblin was the size of a fully grown guy.
Just a strange little man. Yeah, I don't even know what else to say about him, man. Every line of dialogue he says is like, what the fuck, Ryuji? that he's introduced by saying, like, what is it? I want to witness the end of the world, dig a hole into the earth, and ejaculate into it over and over again.
He's just like that the whole book too. Like anytime
the whole entire book,
they'll be just chilling, and he'll be like, Asakawa, I was thinking of something. And he's like, is it normal or crazy? Like the classic thing is the gym creepy or wet?
Yeah.
Oh, it's normal. And it's crazy.
Of course. It's always something fucking insane.
Like, he leaves a suicide note for Asakawa, not the person who he says is his girlfriend and then isn't. Is that all?
Yeah. Or is she? But they do have a close relationship, obviously. It's so strange.
Again, people who've only read a bit will not love it. God, I love Ryuji. What a wild character. You know you getting a thrill when he shows.
Yes. I mean, Asakawa's reasoning of, I'm gonna get this guy involved in it because 1, he'll be super into it, and 2, I'm okay with it if he dies. Like, that's pretty sound reasoning, I have to admit. Just, God, that fucking guy, Ryuji.
I think the thing that I like most about the book, and there's all this like interior stuff that as just a reader is satisfying, and then as a writer is a really great way to show that like you can do these somewhat higher-minded, structural, image symbolic motifs and pull them out and extrapolate them in all these different ways, but still have like a really compelling, super high-intensity, like plot-forward thriller feeling. Like you don't have to go abstract with it. It's cool to go abstract too. Not knocking literary stuff, but you can still be very thoughtful and make like a fucking thrill ride of a book. But it's specifically, and I've read the book 3 times now over the course of my life, and I'm always left in just a gibbering, salivating mess by the end. Oh, I gotta tell more people about this book. It's so fucking sick. And it's especially the more stuff you read. I'm not sure if this has happened for you, but like, it's not, I like less stuff because I deliberately try not to read stuff that I think just fucking sucks because I've read enough stuff. Like,
yeah, I can't do that.
I can do it if it's going to be like that book Trigger Warning, in which a right-winger presents Antifa's literal super soldiers, is frankly kind of dope.
That sounds awesome. Good for them.
Yeah, it's very sick. He thinks it's bad, but it's instead very sick. But like, it's still hard sometimes to find a book that like gets me thrilled like a 14-year-old that just heard death metal for the first time. You're like, yo! But this book always gets me amped like that because it's brainy and psychotic.
It sure is.
If that's not a pitch, I don't know what is.
Yeah, so definitely read Ring. Read it, it's good. You will not regret reading Ring. You might feel very weird after you read it, but you will not regret reading it. It will stay in your head for a long time. And also, I remember reading this a second time and going, okay, how does Ryuji know the average blink speed of a woman versus a man? And then I realized, you know, Ryuji would just happen to fucking know this. He just would just happen to have this information in his brain, because remember, this is 1991, you couldn't Google it yet. I do believe that Ryuji is the kind of guy who would just know the average human blink speed by gender.
I also like how he brings it up, not out of nowhere. That's not really what I need. He's so nonchalant with the information. He doesn't elaborate where he gets it. He says, "Oh yeah, of course it's that. That's average blink speed of an adult woman." And you're like, "Oh." And also Asakawa's like, "Oh yeah, of course."
Right, of course you know that, Ryuji. Why would you not know that? Why would anyone not happen to know that information? It's strange, man.
So people within a certain age range, I think, view things like Reddit or TikTok or even big chunks of Twitter and stuff like that as a way to get real information that hasn't been filtered by X or Y kind of immediately and have like immediate access to it. But kind of the older you get intellectually, not necessarily by age, the more you go, no, these are just charlatans who speak with insane levels of confidence. And sometimes they are right. But sometimes they're insanely wrong, but the tone is always the same. Like, it's never delivered with any level of doubt, and it comes across so natural that unless you train yourself to like pause for a second, you're very inclined to just believe it, which is like in a certain way, that's Ryuji's whole thing. He just says fucking whatever, but with a level of calm confidence that you just go, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and it's like, well, okay, Asakawa, are you gonna spend the limited time you have because you have this tight deadline to fucking go to the library and look up blink speeds? Are you gonna do that? No, you're fucking not. So just when I tell you that this is a woman blinking, you're gonna fucking believe me.
It also reminds me of the way that a lot of people not just get away with acting smarter than other people, but also the mechanic for why so many people feel insecure when someone's just talking and they interpret them as significantly smarter than them, even if it's not strictly true. Because it seems to follow that same thing of like, you witness someone speaking with a level of confidence about some topic, and it provokes either an adoration or like a complete dismissal and resentment, which is also a really insane thing.
Sorry, I was wrestling with the cat again. He's being annoying.
No one needs to complain about, or apologize rather, about wrestling with the cat. That's very important work.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I gotta make sure he doesn't hit the power button on this computer again like he did one time during a previous book club. He just turned off my computer midway through recording the Geek Love episode.
Well, he was done.
Yeah. We were not done, however. We were not done, Hurley.
Yeah, but he was done.
He was done. All right, but I think we are done because we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes, and we're running out of speed, and it is time for me to give my kitty cats their treats. So before we go, Langdon, what do you have to promote?
Really just my continued work over at Death Sentence. Gareth rejoined us a little over a year ago now. I think maybe around 2 years now.
Oh, very nice.
We've been cooking as a 3-man team, just a lot of different, all of us sort of have different directions that we want to point in and some that overlap. So it's just, the show has a lot more variety now, which makes us all really happy. We have a Discord now as well, where we talk about dope books, dope music, and if you talk about whack shit, we'll ban you, and ideally, 6 super soldiers on you to burn your home down. That's ideal. The Patreon money is limited, so super soldier budget, less one. And aside from that, I have continued work over at troublezine.com, doing a bunch of music criticism and a extreme metal column on Consequence of Sound called Mining Metal, where I talk about dope death metal,
Very nice. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, problem.
And thank you all for supporting us. Until next time, keep reading and keep writing good.
This has been Rite Good with R.S. Benedict. It was hosted by R.S. Benedict and produced by Matt Keeley for KS Media LLC. Theme song by OK Glass. For comments and concerns, please write to us at writegud@kittysneezes.com. That's RITEGUD@kittysneezes.com. If you'd like to support us, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/writegood. This has been a Kitty Sneezes production.
kittysneezes.com in color.